Imagine boarding a plane, hoping for a peaceful journey, only to witness a jaw-dropping confrontation that changes everyone's fate on board. It all begins with a simple request: a glass of water. What follows is a whirlwind of power struggles, hidden pasts, and heart-stopping revelations that explode into a frenzy of shocking twists. When one unsuspecting black passenger is refused, water sparks ignite, igniting an unforgettable chain of events. Within 12 minutes, everything and everyone spirals out of control. This is the story of how a single act of disrespect unravels a dark mystery and topples careers in ways no one saw coming. It was an early, hectic morning at Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta. International Airport, the terminal buzzed with frustrated travelers, delayed flights and long lines winding around check-in counters. Among them stood Dr. Monique Reynolds, poised and polished, in a navy blue suit, balancing a busy work schedule and a surprise birthday visit to her mother in Brooklyn. She was a senior executive at a global consulting firm, used to juggling pressure with grace. Her phone buzzed constantly, clients, contracts, deadlines. But for now she was focused on boarding. Delta flight, DL 5723, to JFK nearby. Dina Grant, a flight attendant, was already feeling the strain. A last-minute crew change had thrown off her routine, and she was running on edge. She had barked at a colleague over a missing beverage cart key and forced smiles through clenched teeth. Though she longed for a smooth flight, tension brewed beneath the surface. As boarding began, Monique approached the aircraft with calm professionalism. Dina, stationed at the door, greeted passengers with a rehearsed politeness. When Monique passed, Dina recognized her as a first-class flyer, but gave no special effort to conceal her irritability. Monique took her seat and immediately opened her laptop to finish some work before takeoff. Around her families juggled restless kids. Students laughed over carry-ons and other business travelers tuned out the chaos. It seemed like a typical flight, until a simple request would later set everything in motion. As the cabin door closed and the plane began taxiing, both women remained unaware of the collision course ahead. A delayed flight, frayed tempers, and personal burdens would soon combine to spark a confrontation that would ripple far beyond the airplane's aisle. What began as a routine morning would end with lives changed, jobs on the line, and reputations tested, all starting with a single simple request: a glass of water. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and passengers began settling in for the hour-and-a-half trip to JFK. Dana, walking down the aisle, prepared to distribute snacks and beverages as soon as the plane reached a comfortable cruising altitude. Her crisp uniform and neatly pinned name tag were outward signs of professionalism, but her clenched jaw suggested mounting impatience. Monique closed her laptop, deciding it was best to catch a breath before diving into more work. She pressed the flight attendant call button, intending to request some water to stay hydrated, an especially important habit given the dehydrating conditions of airplane cabins. It took several minutes for Dina to make her way to Monique's row. When she finally arrived, her facial expression was stony, as though she were annoyed by any demands. "Yes," she asked curtly. "Could I get a glass of water, please?" Monique asked with a polite smile. She had traveled often and valued kindness toward flight attendants, knowing that their job was rarely easy. Dina nodded, but her manner lacked the usual courtesy. "I'll see if we have any bottled water left in the galley," she responded, not even attempting to hide the underlying tension in her tone. Monique found it odd. Typically, flight attendants were quick to accommodate such a simple request, especially in first class. She brushed off the rudeness, attributing it to a stressful morning. But 10 minutes passed, then 15, and still no water. Monique observed Dina serving other passengers their drinks, some even receiving water without acknowledging her at all. A sense of unease began to creep in. As a seasoned traveler, Monique had never been outright ignored. She considered whether she should press the call button again, but decided to wait. Patience was often the better path, especially in an environment like an airplane where tempers could easily flare. But the more she watched Dina, the stronger the nagging feeling became that this wasn't just forgetfulness. Some passengers in the adjacent rows noticed trading sideways glances and raised eyebrows. One man whispered to his wife, speculating if the flight attendant was simply overwhelmed or something more. Tension thickened, drifting through the aisles like a tangible presence. Monique attempted to distract herself by reading the flight magazine. She flipped through pages about luxury Caribbean resorts, business travel tips, and updates on new flight routes. None of it could hold her attention. A swirl of questions kept spinning in her mind. Why was Dina ignoring her? Did her simple request somehow rub the attendant the wrong way? Could it be a personal bias? Monique didn't want to assume the worst, but her instincts were nudging her toward a dark suspicion. She reached for the call button again. This time, Dina showed up sooner, but her stance was defensive. "Yes, how can I help you?" she asked, her words clipped. "I requested a glass of water about 15 minutes ago," Monique said, trying to keep her voice calm and neutral. "Could you please bring it when you have a moment?" Dina's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "We're in the middle of our service routine. We usually serve drinks with the snack cart once we reach a safe cruising altitude, and the captain gives the clearance. I'll get to you when I can." The explanation made little sense. Monique had traveled first class frequently, and the procedure often involved an immediate offer of a drink, especially water upon seating. Also, Dina had already been handing out drinks to other passengers without waiting for the snack cart. This inconsistency left Monique perplexed and unsettled. However, she decided not to escalate the situation just yet. The flight was still relatively short, and she preferred to keep it peaceful. But the uneasy feeling settled deeper into Monique's stomach. Something was off, and she couldn't shake the sense that Dina's attitude had a pointed edge to it. She tried to refocus on her reading, ignoring the whispers around her. Then she closed her eyes, willing herself to breathe deeply and calm down. Little did she know the water fiasco was just the tip of the iceberg. Within the next few minutes, the tension would escalate beyond anything she could have imagined, culminating in a scenario that would change the dynamic of the entire flight and alter the fates of the crew forever. The seeds of a monumental showdown were being planted in that quiet moment, hidden behind forced smiles and polite phrases. All it would take was one final push to make everything unravel. Cruising at 36,000 feet, Flight DL 553 glided smoothly through clear skies. The seatbelt sign blinked off again, allowing passengers to move freely. Dina and her fellow flight attendants rolled the snack cart through first class, offering an assortment of beverages and small bites. Despite the seemingly standard routine, a tension crackled in the air. Passengers in nearby seats had already taken notice of the awkward interactions between Dina and Monique. When the snack cart neared Monique's row, her senses sharpened in anticipation. She watched Dina hand out drinks to the passenger. Directly across the aisle, a middle-aged man who received a cup of water without the slightest hassle. Monique pressed her lips together, determined to remain composed. She waited. Finally, the cart stopped at Monique's seat. Dina barely looked at her. "Something to drink?" she asked mechanically, as if reading from a script. Monique met her gaze. "Yes, water, please." Dina poured a glass of orange juice and handed it to the passenger next to Monique, then turned her attention to the snack basket. She did not offer Monique anything. The blatant snub was impossible to ignore. "Excuse me," Monique said, her voice clipped but still measured. "Water, please." Dina hesitated a moment, her eyes flickering from Monique's face to the row behind her. She seemed to weigh her options. Then, in a move that defied all professional standards, she said flatly, "We're out of bottled water." She started to push the cart forward. A hush fell over the surrounding rows. Several passengers looked on in disbelief. They had just seen her distribute water moments ago. Even Monique's seatmate, the man holding the orange juice, shot a concerned glance at Monique. Monique could feel a knot forming in her stomach, a blend of anger, disappointment, and confusion. She cleared her throat, refusing to let Dina walk away so easily. "You just gave him water," she said, pointing to the man across the aisle. "And I saw you had at least 4 or 5 bottles in the cart." Dina's face flushed, but she doubled down. "I'm afraid that was the last of our supply in first class." She lied through her teeth. "We haven't more left at this time." The confrontation had escalated into something undeniable. Heads turned. The hum of whispered conversations began to buzz around them. Monique bristled, striving for composure in an increasingly humiliating situation. She knew this had stepped beyond a simple oversight. "Is there a reason you're denying me water?" Monique asked, her voice trembling between restraint and rising indignation. Dina glanced nervously around. She opened her mouth as though trying to find some excuse, but nothing came. Instead of addressing Monique directly, she flipped the handle of the cart and murmured, "I have to continue serving the rest of the cabin," and attempted to move on. That was the final straw. Monique wasn't one to accept blatant disrespect, especially not in a public setting. She pressed the flight attendant call button again, this time with force. Within seconds, another flight attendant arrived. Andrea, who had overheard some of the exchange. Andrea wore a concerned expression, sensing the tension, but unsure how to address it. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" Andrea asked gently. Monique straightened her posture. "Yes, I'm trying to understand why I'm not being given water. The other passengers received some, and I was told it's out of stock when clearly it isn't." Andrea looked momentarily perplexed. She glanced at the half-full cart near the galley, clearly indicating there were more bottles left. "Of course we have water," she replied, trying to sound reassuring. "I'll bring you some right now." But before Andrea could follow through, Dina inserted herself into the conversation. "I told her it's unavailable in first class." Dina said, her voice tight. Andrea hesitated, casting a wary glance between Monique and Dina. Something in her expression suggested she realized that Dina's statement made no sense, but also that challenging a fellow crew member directly could lead to an uncomfortable confrontation. Yet the situation had already spiraled into an embarrassing spectacle. "Let me check the galley to see what's left," Andrea offered, carefully neutral. As Andrea walked toward the galley, Dina leaned forward, her face inches from Monique's. Her voice was low, but passengers close by could still hear. "You think you can just demand whatever you want because you're in first class? Not everyone's here to cater to you." Monique's face burned partly from indignation and partly from the shock of hearing such words. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding anymore. There was a personal edge, one dripping with hostility. Every fiber in Monique's being screamed at her to stand up to challenge this blatant disrespect. "Listen," Monique said, her voice firm. "I don't know what your problem is, but I do know this is completely unacceptable. I will be speaking to your supervisor the moment we land." Dina's eyes flickered with something akin to panic, but she masked it quickly with a scowl. "Do what you want," she hissed, "but you're not getting any special treatment from me." With that, she turned on her heel and stomped off, leaving Monique in stunned silence. A small crowd of curious onlookers had formed the cabin, quickly dividing between those who sympathized with Monique and those who were too caught up in their own matters to intervene. In the midst of the chaos, Monique felt the weight of every gaze, every hushed whisper. She gripped her armrest, her knuckles white. Never in her life had she been so openly disrespected by a service professional, especially in such a brazen manner. She considered pressing the call button again, or even demanding to speak to the lead flight attendant or the captain. Yet she hesitated partly out of shock, and partly because she wanted to handle this with the calm, calculated approach she'd learned from her years in high-pressure business negotiations. In that moment, a single unsettling thought cemented itself in her mind. This was personal. Dina had targeted her for some reason. Monique thought about all the ways prejudice and power dynamics could manifest. Although she had faced subtle discrimination before, never had it been so blatantly thrust in her face. Monique inhaled a shaky breath and exhaled slowly. She resolved to keep her composure, but a new determination sparked in her eyes. She had no intention of letting Dina get away with treating her like this. What Monique did not know was that her resolve was about to unleash a chain of events that would leave everyone aboard Flight DL573 stunned, and that a twist of fate was about to reveal her own unexpected authority in the world of aviation. As Andrea returned with a glass of water, she apologized profusely on behalf of the airline. Monique thanked her calmly, still grappling with the whirlwind of emotions coursing through her. She sipped the water more, out of a need to steady her nerves than to quench her thirst. Meanwhile, a wave of whispers swept through the cabin. Some passengers pulled out their phones, discreetly recording snippets of the tension. Others caught the moment Dina stormed off, her expression livid. It was a scene that begged for an explanation, one that no one had. They only knew that a confrontation, unlike any they'd seen on an ordinary flight, had just begun. Half an hour later, the tension had not waned. Monique had resumed working on her laptop, her mind cycling through strategies. Should she document the incident? Should she wait until landing to lodge a formal complaint? The airline's corporate office would definitely need to hear about this. She made a mental note to find the right channel. After all, her network in the aviation industry was not insignificant, and here lay Monique's first hidden card. She was more than just a seasoned business executive. She sat on an advisory board for a project funded by the Federal Aviation Administration (FAA), focusing on improving airlines' customer service metrics and ensuring compliance with anti-discrimination policies. Her involvement, though not widely publicized, had made her a known figure among certain powerful individuals in the industry. As if on cue, Monique's phone pinged with an email notification, yet another urgent work matter. She fought the urge to roll her eyes. Problems seemed to gravitate toward her when she was thousands of feet in the air. She momentarily forgot about Dina, immersing herself in the new crisis. Ironically, that turned out to be a blessing. She remained calm and collected, her professional training kicking in like an instinctual response. A few rows behind Monique, two other flight attendants, including Andrea, whispered in hushed tones. Andrea, it turned out, was friends with one of Monique's employees, a coincidence that would soon prove pivotal. She had recognized Monique's name on the passenger manifest earlier, but thought nothing of it. Now, given the incident with Dina, Andrea wondered if she should warn her senior purser, or even the captain, that a potentially high-profile passenger on board had just been severely mistreated. Dina, for her part, was not finished. She hovered near the galley, watching Monique with a level of intensity that bordered on obsessive. Perhaps it was shame driving her deeper into hostility, or perhaps it was a sense of personal animosity she harbored, for reasons even she might not fully understand. Whatever the case, it fueled her defiance. In her mind, Monique was a threat that needed to be neutralized. At the same time, Dina carried a hidden background as well. She had been disciplined before for inappropriate behavior, narrowly avoiding termination. She blamed those incidents on difficult passengers, never taking full accountability for her conduct. While her superiors had given her another chance, they made it clear that one more complaint could seal her fate. But Dina lived in a mental space where she felt persecuted, convinced the airline was out to scapegoat her. In that paranoid state, she found any criticism to be an unjust attack. As the aircraft sailed closer to New York, the tension on board thickened further. Passengers were dividing into quiet factions, those who had seen and heard enough to be outraged on Monique's behalf, and those who simply wanted an uneventful journey. The hum of normal in-flight chatter had given way to an uneasy stillness, broken only by the whir of engines and an occasional overhead announcement. Then came the moment that would tilt the scales. Monique received a phone call from the FAA project director, which she could not answer while airborne. Seeing the caller ID, her heart quickened. She knew this conversation, once she was on the ground, could change many things. She also recalled that her role with the FAA included direct lines of communication to high-ranking airline executives. If she wanted, she could escalate this matter through official channels and not just a standard passenger complaint. She could potentially invoke a formal investigation into the airline's practices, especially if evidence suggested discrimination. But Monique was not out to sabotage a company that until that day she had thought highly of. She preferred to resolve conflicts amicably. Even so, after being humiliated and openly disrespected, she couldn't dismiss the possibility. The ball was very much in the airline's court, or more accurately, in the hands of one disgruntled flight attendant who seemed hell-bent on fanning the flames of conflict. A shift in the cabin's lighting signaled the flight was beginning its descent into New York. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, instructing passengers to power down electronics and prepare for landing. Monique closed her laptop carefully, storing it under the seat. She looked outside the window, glimpsing the sprawling landscape of the city. The skyline just visible beneath a veil of drifting clouds. Moments later, a quiet beep signaled a new message, this time from Andrea. Monique glanced at it discreetly. "I'm sorry for the incident, FYI. You have allies on this flight. The purser knows what's going on. Please let us resolve this the right way once we land." Andrea Monique breathed a sigh of relief. At least she wasn't alone in seeing the problem. Dina might have denied her water and harassed her, but the rest of the crew wasn't blind. They had integrity, and Andrea's message hinted that official steps were already in motion. Monique's mind churned with the possibilities. Would the airline simply file a generic report, or would there be real consequences for Dina? What Monique couldn't guess yet was that the entire resolution was about to take a very different turn. Because, in addition to being a high-ranking corporate executive and an FAA advisor, Monique had another hidden card to play, one that would catapult her from victim to the person who held the crew's immediate future in her hands. And with the clock ticking, the entire flight crew, including Dina, would soon discover that the woman they had disrespected was not someone to be trifled with. When Flight DL573 touched down at John F. Kennedy International Airport, a collective sigh of relief filtered through the cabin, as if everyone believed the drama had ended. But for those who had witnessed the confrontation, Monique Andrea and the nearby passengers, an unspoken tension remained. The plane taxied to the gate, the seatbelt sign turned off, and passengers began retrieving bags from overhead compartments. Monique gathered her belongings calmly, but she felt the weight of countless stares. She stood in the aisle, waiting for the crowd to inch forward, her mind already formulating how she would address the situation. Once inside the terminal, Dina avoided eye contact, hanging back near the galley and busily flipping through a safety manual she wasn't actually reading. Her posture was rigid, her eyes locked on a point in the middle distance. She seemed determined to pretend that nothing had happened, as though she could will the entire episode into oblivion. Andrea, however, moved to stand near the exit, greeting passengers as they disembarked. When Monique reached her, Andrea spoke quietly. "Ms. Reynolds, the purser is waiting by the jet bridge if you'd like to speak with him." Her expression was a mixture of empathy and professionalism. Monique's heart pounded, but she kept her composure. "Thank you, Andrea," she said, nodding politely. Outside the plane in the enclosed jet bridge, Monique was met by Terry Holbrook, the purser, a man in his early 40s with kind eyes and a posture that exuded competence. He introduced himself, offering an apology right off the bat. "I've been informed of the situation that occurred on board," he said. "I want to extend my sincerest regrets on behalf of Delta Airlines. We take these matters very seriously." Monique appreciated the directness. "Thank you," she replied, deciding not to unload her full frustration. "Just yet. I would like to speak with whoever is in charge at the gate or a supervisor. This incident was unacceptable." Terry inclined his head in understanding hurriedly. "I've already contacted our customer service manager here at JFK. He's on his way to meet us." As if summoned by magic, a uniformed airline representative named Ray Donovan emerged. He introduced himself, repeating many of Terry's words about how sorry they were. Monique listened politely. Dina emerged from the aircraft, shortly after trailing behind some of the last passengers. Her face went pale when she saw Ray. She clutched her bag and looked away, as though hoping to blend into the walls. "Ray, could we use that office over there?" Terry asked, gesturing to a small glass-walled conference room near the gate area. Ray nodded. "Yes, let's step in." Monique followed, maintaining a cool exterior, though inside she felt a wave of adrenaline. She was about to lay out the story with clarity and evidence, yet she also sensed this was just the tip of the iceberg. She needed to do more than just file a complaint. This was a chance to address a deeper issue, one that encompassed fair treatment, professionalism, and respect for all passengers. Inside the small office, Monique placed her carry-on near the door and took a seat at a round table. Ray and Terry sat across from her, both looking tense but earnest. They explained that Dina would wait outside unless Monique specifically requested her presence. Monique declined to have Dina in the room, feeling it would be more productive if she spoke to management directly. Monique recounted the events methodically, from the initial request for water to Dina's outright denial and the subsequent hostility. She provided details about the timeline, referencing the seatmate who received water while she was refused. She also mentioned Andrea's intervention and the text message that proved water was readily available. Ray's expression darkened. "This is clearly a violation of our customer service protocol, and potentially it suggests discriminatory behavior. We will conduct a thorough investigation." Terry nodded in agreement. "I've already noted that several passengers witnessed the incident. We will be collecting statements." Monique took a steadying breath. "I'm a frequent flyer with Delta, as well as an FAA advisor, working on anti-discrimination and service compliance programs. I know this goes beyond a mere inconvenience. People deserve dignity, especially when they're paying for a premium service." At the mention of the FAA, Ray's eyes widened. He exchanged a quick glance with Terry, who swallowed hard. They realized the gravity of the situation. This was not just a matter of an unruly passenger complaint. This involved potential federal oversight. Their expressions turned from concerned to downright alarmed. "We had no idea you were with the FAA," Terry murmured, leaning forward. "Please understand, we will handle this swiftly. Delta has zero tolerance for any form of discrimination." I appreciate that, Monique said calmly, but words aren't enough. "I intend to file a formal complaint, and I have the authority to initiate a compliance review if necessary." Ray nodded vigorously. "We understand. Let's do this correctly. We'll interview Dina, talk to witnesses, and we can keep you informed of any disciplinary steps." Before they could continue, a knock sounded at the door. Andrea entered, looking apprehensive. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but there's an urgent issue. One of the higher-ups from corporate is on the phone, specifically asking to speak with Ms. Reynolds. They said it's about the flight incident." Ray and Terry looked at Monique, clearly startled. Monique's brows furrowed. This was quicker than she'd expected. Word must have traveled fast, perhaps because of Andrea or a passenger's social media post. Still, Monique followed Andrea into the adjacent room where a desk phone blinked red. She picked up the receiver. "This is Monique Reynolds." A measured, authoritative voice came through the line, introducing himself as Daniel Green, Delta Airlines Regional Director of Customer Experience. He apologized profusely, acknowledging that he was aware of Monique's advisory role with the FAA. His tone was respectful, yet strained, hinting that he realized the severity of the potential fallout. "Miss Reynolds first and foremost. I offer my sincerest apologies," he began. "We received multiple reports from passengers regarding the incident. We take any claims of discrimination extremely seriously, and I assure you the situation will be rectified immediately." Monique's gaze settled on Andrea, who watched from a distance. She responded carefully. "Thank you for reaching out. I do hope the airline addresses not just this single incident, but the underlying training and oversight issues that allow such behavior to occur." Green responded with corporate aplomb. "We are prepared to take the necessary steps, even if that means immediate disciplinary action for the crew member involved. We hope to retain your trust and avoid escalation to the FAA or other federal agencies if possible." Monique's lips parted slightly. The call was as much an olive branch as it was a plea to contain the damage. The question was, how far did she want to push this? She was not vindictive by nature, but she also couldn't let such an egregious act go unpunished. "We can discuss further," she replied, "once I get all the facts. Right now I'm still waiting for an official statement and to see how your management handles the next steps. Then we can decide how to proceed." By the time she hung up the phone, her heart was pounding. It struck her that the entire flight crew's fate, particularly Dina's, lay in her hands. She had the power to demand immediate termination if she saw fit. Yet she also considered the broader implications. Was Dina's termination alone going to fix systemic issues? What about the need for better training, better oversight? When Monique returned to the conference room with Ray and Terry, she found Dina standing there, arms crossed, face pale. Someone must have asked her to come in for a direct confrontation. Perhaps Terry thought it would provide closure or clarity. Dina barely glanced at Monique, but kept her stance defensive. A hush fell over the room. Finally, Ray spoke. "Dina, Ms. Reynolds has lodged a serious complaint against you, and we have corroborating accounts from other passengers and a fellow crew member. Do you have anything you wish to say?" Dina's lips pressed into a thin line. "It's all been blown out of proportion. I was doing my job. She was demanding special treatment." Monique's eyes widened in disbelief. She considered letting the statement go, but then decided she needed to address it head-on. "Asking for water is not special treatment," she said, her tone steely. Every other passenger got it without an issue. Dina looked ready to argue, but Ray swiftly cut her off. We'll handle the fact-finding process. Right now, I need you to wait outside while we conclude our conversation with Ms. Reynolds. Dina shot Monique a glare, but stepped out, letting the door close behind her. Ray exhaled slowly, as if the room had been suffocating. Given everything, Ms. Reynolds, we have no choice but to remove Dina from active duty pending an investigation. Please believe that we're not just doing this because of your position or your affiliation with the FAA. This behavior breaches our guidelines, outright. Terry nodded firmly. I've already filed a preliminary report. Our staff is prepared to escort Dina off the premises and suspend her flight privileges while the investigation proceeds. If you have any further recommendations or demands, we're listening. Monique folded her hands, measuring her words carefully. She wanted justice, but she also wanted to be fair. For now, I'll expect a comprehensive follow-up from Delta's corporate offices within the next 48 hours. If that doesn't happen, I'll move forward with a more formal route through the FAA. Ray and Terry agreed, scribbling notes. With that, Monique stood. She was exhausted physically and emotionally. I'd like to go. I have a personal engagement in the city. Please email or call me with any updates. The men nodded, rising as she made her way to the door. Andrea trailed behind her, offering a small apologetic smile. Monique paused before stepping out into the bustling terminal. What none of them realized at that very moment was that the next few minutes would bring about an even bigger shock. For as Monique prepared to leave the gate area, an unexpected piece of information was about to surface, one that would change the entire direction of the resolution. The roles of victim and oppressor, boss and subordinate, were about to become far more complicated than anyone had envisioned. Fate was weaving an intricate web, and the final twist was still yet to come. Monique emerged from the small conference room, feeling a mix of relief and mental fatigue. She had followed procedure, put the wheels of an official complaint into motion, and demanded accountability. Yet an uneasy feeling lingered. She wished she could simply shake off the entire ordeal and focus on her mother's birthday celebration, but the confrontation kept replaying in her mind, each retelling fueling her frustration. As she passed the gate's waiting area, her eyes caught a flicker of movement. Dina was sitting in a row of vacant chairs, hunched over her face, hidden in her hands. For a fleeting moment, Monique felt a pang of empathy. She knew all too well that job security in the aviation industry could be precarious. Yet she also remembered the venom in Dina's words. Monique set her jaw, pushing aside the notion of pity. She walked on, heading for the exit. At the same time, Dina stood, glanced in Monique's direction, and abruptly turned away. Both women seemed intent on avoiding further contact. Just then, Monique's phone buzzed again. An urgent text message from her assistant. "Call me ASAP. Critical update." Sighing, she found a quiet corner near a window overlooking the tarmac. She dialed quickly. Her assistant answered on the first ring, Dr. Reynolds. "I'm sorry to bother you, but there's a problem. We just received word that the CEO of Ashfield Consulting, our major international client, has an urgent request to confirm something about a recommended candidate for his new aviation project." Monique frowned, puzzled. What does that have to do with me right now? Her assistant hesitated. The candidate is Dina Grant. It appears she applied for a role in the corporate aviation department and got far in the interview process. They just discovered a reference to you as a potential contact or an indirect reference. Seems she worked under a manager who reported to one of our partner firms. The CEO wants your professional opinion. The final job offer is on hold until they get feedback. The twist hit Monique with the force of a sledgehammer. Dina Grant, The same flight attendant who had just refused her water and humiliated her was being considered for a cushy corporate aviation position at a company with which Monique's firm was deeply involved, and the CEO was personally requesting Monique's input, her assistant continued. They're specifically asking if you can vouch for her character or verify her track record. Apparently, she boasted some achievements in safety compliance and passenger management. The CEO found out you were on the advisory board for the FAA and that you might have crossed paths in a professional capacity. They want the green light from you. Monique's mind reeled. The karmic implications of the situation were staggering. She felt a heady mix of shock and an odd sense of poetic justice. Dina needed Monique's endorsement without even realizing it. Yet here they were, fresh from a confrontational episode that revealed Dina's troubling behavior. "I'll handle it," Monique said, quietly into the phone, her pulse racing. "Send me the details. I'll follow up with the CEO directly." When the call ended, Monique leaned against the window, staring at the runway lights. The swirl of emotions, anger, disbelief, a touch of grim amusement battled within her. Fate had dealt an extraordinary hand. She now held the power not only to influence Dina's standing with Delta Airlines, but also to determine her eligibility for this pivotal role. In a sense, she had Dina's entire career in her hands. Though some might relish the chance for payback, Monique felt conflicted. Was it ethically right to bury Dina's prospects based on this single encounter, however egregious? Yet how could she ignore such blatant evidence of prejudice and unprofessionalism? For a long moment, Monique simply stared at the bustle of airport operations outside. The roar of engines and the blur of airplane lights felt strangely distant. The question about how to proceed gnawed at her, a moral dilemma, heavier than any she had faced in recent memory. Finally, she squared her shoulders, inhaling deeply. She would do what she always did, pursue the truth and uphold high standards of integrity, even if it meant delivering hard consequences. One could not allow malicious or biased individuals to thrive unchecked in positions of authority. With renewed resolve, she made another call this time to Robert Clay, the CEO of Ashfield Consulting. He answered on the second ring, sounding warm yet direct. "Monique," Robert exclaimed, "I'm glad you could call. We're in a bind regarding a candidate named Dina Grant. Her references are outstanding, but we spotted your name in some cross-referenced materials from the FAA. I wanted to see if you knew her." Monique grimaced. "Yes, I do," she said carefully, choosing her words. "We just had a revealing encounter. I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss her candidacy in detail." Robert sensed her hesitation. "Is everything all right? We were quite impressed by her credentials, but if you have reservations, we need to hear them." Monique nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I do have reservations." Robert. "She exhibited behavior that I believe disqualifies her from certain responsibilities, especially those involving management and customer-facing roles." She could almost hear the frown in Robert's voice. "That's serious. Please let's talk it through in person or via video conference as soon as possible. I trust your judgment, and if this is a red flag, we need to address it immediately." They agreed to speak again later that afternoon. Monique ended the call, heart pounding. The weight of the situation settled fully on her. Dina's fate had just become intertwined with Monique's decision in a way neither woman could have predicted, and from Monique's vantage, it seemed less and less likely that Dina was suitable for the new position. Emerging from her quiet corner, Monique glanced back toward the gate area. Dina was gone, presumably escorted away to await the airline's disciplinary process. If Dina only knew that in just a few hours her job prospects might be incinerated by the very woman she had humiliated At 36,000 feet, the moral question loomed large: would it be justice or mercy? After landing in New York, Monique left the airport and headed straight to her mother's brownstone in Brooklyn. She needed both rest and clarity. Though she had remained composed throughout the confrontation with Dina, her thoughts kept circling around the fallout and the decision still looming over her, whether to inform the CEO of Ashfield Consulting about Dina's behavior, which could end her shot at a major corporate role. At her mother Clarice's home, the mood was festive. Balloons, food, and warmth greeted Monique at the door. For a while she relaxed, enjoying stories and laughter, but her mother soon noticed something was off. In the kitchen away from guests, Clarice asked gently, "What's bothering you?" Monique explained the incident on the flight, in brief. She left out Dina's job connection, but described the humiliation, the denial of water, and the hostility. Clarice was furious. "That's unacceptable. I raised you to speak up for what's right, and you did." Still, Monique hesitated. "If I tell the truth to the CEO, she'll likely lose that new job too. Maybe she was just overwhelmed. What if I ruin her future over one mistake?" Clarice looked her daughter in the eye. "No, baby. She made her own choices. You didn't create this situation. She did. And if you don't speak up, what kind of people will be in positions of power?" Her mother's wisdom landed hard. Monique knew she was right. It wasn't about revenge. It was about responsibility. About ensuring people like Dina, who misuse authority, don't continue to harm others. That night, surrounded by family and celebration, Monique found clarity. She didn't need to be vindictive, but she couldn't protect someone who had so brazenly disrespected others. She would tell the truth. In the days that followed, Monique carried on with her business in New York, meeting clients, attending her mother's post-birthday brunch, and preparing for her return to Atlanta. Although she tried to move forward, the events with Dina stayed close to her thoughts. Updates trickled in from multiple sources. Ray Donovan, the customer service manager at Delta, sent her an email detailing the interim findings of their investigation. Witness accounts confirmed that Dina had repeatedly refused Monique's water request, despite having available supplies. One passenger even handed over cell phone footage of the incident. Another passenger mentioned hearing Dina mutter something about passengers who think they're so entitled. After the initial confrontation, Delta's legal department had flagged the situation as critical risk. Monique only skimmed the content, relieved to see that the airline appeared serious about accountability. Shortly after receiving Ray's email, her phone rang. It was Andrea, the flight attendant, who had tried to intervene. "Hi, Miss Reynolds. I hope you don't mind me calling," she began. "I just wanted to give you an update. Dina's been suspended pending formal termination. This is confidential, but I thought you should know. The management team felt there was enough evidence of misconduct to end her employment." Monique's breath caught. She wasn't exactly surprised, but hearing the finality was sobering. "Thank you, Andrea, for letting me know," she said quietly. "I appreciate your honesty throughout this." Andrea seemed relieved that Monique was not upset with her. Dina was furious, blaming everyone but herself. She confided, "I've tried to remain professional, but I wanted you to know you did the right thing. We have to uphold standards. No one should experience what you did," Monique thanked Andrea again, and ended the call, the final nail in Dina's coffin, clanging in her thoughts. Later that afternoon, Robert Clay from Ashfield Consulting followed up confirming the official withdrawal of Dina's job offer. In fact, it turned out there had been discrepancies in Dina's resume, inflated achievements, dubious references, and a questionable claim about having improved safety metrics by a significant margin. The entire application had unraveled once Ashfield's HR dug deeper. Monique sat alone in her Manhattan hotel room, feeling waves of conflicted emotions. She had effectively shut the door on Dina's future with Delta and with a promising corporate role. Would Dina learn from this lesson? Or would she spiral into bitterness? Monique had no desire to see anyone's life ruined, but she couldn't ignore the principle of moral consequence. To maintain a semblance of closure, Monique typed a final email response to Ray Donovan, thanking Delta for their thorough follow-up and acknowledging the steps they had taken. She expressed her hope that the airline would invest even more in diversity and sensitivity training for staff, ensuring no one else would be treated the way she was. She hit send, feeling the final puzzle piece click into place. Although no formal FAA complaint had been filed, Delta's swift action had rendered it unnecessary. Monique remained open to re-evaluating that stance if she found any indication that the airline was backsliding on their commitments. Some might have expected Monique to celebrate, but she felt no celebration, only a profound sense of relief that justice had been served, and a twinge of sadness over how easily one person's hatred and negligence had brought them to ruin. It was a victory tinged with regret, yet a necessary one. On her last night in New York, Monique went for a late stroll through Times Square. The neon lights and towering billboards painted the night sky a spectacle of urban energy. She walked aimlessly, reflecting on the whirlwind events. Lost in thought, she nearly missed the familiar face on a street corner, Dina Grant. Dina stood near a subway entrance, her expression etched with defeat. Dressed in casual clothes, she looked worlds away from the crisp flight attendant uniform. The moment their eyes met, a flash of recognition passed between them. Monique felt the air thicken. Her first impulse was to walk away, but something in Dina's posture, slumped, shoulders, eyes glistening, stirred a spark of compassion. Against her better judgment, Monique approached. Dina swallowed hard, her face a mix of anger, humiliation, and desperation. "I suppose you're satisfied now?" she muttered. The words were accusatory, but her voice lacked its former venom. Monique steadied herself. "I'm not here to gloat. I'm sorry your choice has led to this. But you brought it on yourself." Dina's eyes flickered, perhaps with a flash of shame. She inhaled shakily, glancing away from Monique's penetrating stare. "You don't understand the pressure I was under," she finally said, voice trembling. "I've been dealing with personal issues. My fiancé left. I'm behind on rent. My mother's medical bills are piling up. I know it doesn't excuse what I did, but it's been rough." I just snapped. Monique inhaled slowly, searching for the right response. "Life can be rough," she agreed quietly, "but it doesn't justify cruelty or discrimination." Dina flinched. "You think I'm a racist? I'm not. I don't even know, angry. I hated seeing wealthy people in first class. It's like they live in a different world, and you so poised, so sure of yourself, it got under my skin." Monique was taken aback by the raw honesty. She didn't condone Dina's behavior, but at least this was a window into the muddled motives behind it. "Privilege can be frustrating if you're struggling," she said carefully, "but prejudice doesn't solve anything. You can't treat someone differently based on your assumptions." Dina ran a hand through her hair, tears threatening to spill, I know. "And now, I've lost everything. Delta was my lifeline. My shot at that corporate job was going to fix all my problems. I guess you shut that down too." Monique felt her heart tighten. "They asked for my honest input," she said gently. "I told them the truth about our encounter. But if you presented yourself with the same approach in that interview, the position would have fallen apart eventually." Silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the cacophony of taxis and street vendors. Finally, Dina spoke, her voice subdued. "I want to apologize. I know it's late for that. But I mean it. I'm sorry for how I treated you." Monique studied Dina's face for a long moment. She saw genuine regret, though also desperation. "Thank you for apologizing," Monique said softly. "It doesn't erase what happened, but I accept it." Dina nodded, relief tinged with sorrow. She wiped at her eyes, glancing around, as though embarrassed to be seen breaking down in public. "I'm not asking for your help or anything. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Monique hesitated. A swirl of thoughts and emotions converged. She had every right to walk away, to never see or speak to Dina again. Yet she recalled her own moral compass, the desire to create space for growth and change. Even in those who had acted wrongly, I believe people can learn and redeem themselves. Monique finally said, "If you need a reference for a basic job, not in a high-stakes customer service role, I'm willing to acknowledge that you realized your mistake and apologized. That might help you get back on your feet." Dina seemed stunned. Her eyes flickered with hope. Thank you. I don't deserve that, but thank you. Maybe I can do better." "Somewhere else," Monique nodded, placing a hand gently on Dina's shoulder. "Don't waste the chance with that." Monique turned and walked away, leaving Dina standing under the bright lights of Times Square. She couldn't predict the future or guarantee that Dina would turn her life around, but she had done what she could. It was a bittersweet coda to a tumultuous chapter 1 that left Monique feeling unexpectedly lighter. A few weeks later, Monique arrived back in Atlanta, stepping into her office with a renewed sense of focus. She had parted ways with the fiasco of Flight DL5073, though the lessons remained ingrained in her memory. Respect, empathy, and professional conduct mattered deeply. No matter the background or personal struggles, she dived into work, consulting on high-level business strategies, leveraging her FAA advisory role to push for more stringent anti-discrimination training in multiple airline programs. She even spoke at a conference, highlighting the importance of personal accountability in customer service roles. Without naming Dina, she recounted the cautionary tale of how a single act of meanness could irreparably damage a career. As fate would have it, a month later, an email popped into her inbox from an unfamiliar address. Opening it, Monique discovered it was from Dina, who had found a job as a receptionist at a small logistics firm. Dina thanked Monique for her measured words in Times Square and admitted she was trying to rebuild her life. The note concluded with a promise, never to forget what she had learned. Monique reread the email twice, a slow smile forming. It felt good to know that a seed of growth might have been planted. Despite the painful circumstances, she replied briefly, wishing Dina well in her new role. As the seasons changed, the story of Flight DL573 became something of an office legend, retold and embellished by Monique's colleagues and friends who had heard about her showdown. But for Monique, it remained both a cautionary tale and a testament to the power of accountability. A single glass of water, or the refusal of one, had unraveled an entire web of hidden prejudices, professional failings, and personal struggles. In the end, the flight attendant who refused a black woman water was terminated within weeks, losing not only her current job, but a promising career opportunity. Hard karma had hit back swiftly and decisively. Yet in the quiet aftermath, the seeds of redemption were sown. Monique continued to soar in her career, her voice an even stronger advocate for equitable treatment. Whenever she boarded another flight, she carried a gentle reminder. Respect is not optional, and the smallest acts of kindness or cruelty can change someone's destiny. Thank you for following this emotional and dramatic journey, one where a moment of cruelty sparked a chain reaction that toppled careers and tested personal morals. The story of Flight DL573 offers a powerful reminder that every action, no matter how small, carries consequences. Karma can arrive swiftly and unexpectedly, reshaping destinies in its wake. Yet even amid the turmoil, there is room for growth and redemption for those willing to change their course. If you found value, inspiration, or insight in this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. By spreading these messages of accountability and empathy, we can encourage more understanding and kindness in our everyday lives. Don't miss out on future tales and reflections that shine a light on human resilience and the importance of doing what's right, no matter the cost.